shorter than Sean. Our last, but certainly not our least graduate, was born in Manhattan, Kansas, not New York. And she hails most recently from the Virginia suburbs of Washington, D.C., one of 18 places on her list of homes. She's a writer, a photographer, a multimedia artist, and a teacher. She's also a traveler, a social justice advocate, and a baker of berry vanilla tarts, vegan shepherd's pie, and peanut butter espresso cupcakes. All very delicious, I can attest. But as her writing can also attest, a person or a place or a tree or a cornfield is not only what it does or what it looks like on the surface, but what it's made of and how it came to grow into that shape in the first place. And so I should also say that she's warm-hearted and wryly funny, even-tempered, but impatient with injustice especially. A generous, genuine, entirely wonderful human, and someone I'm very glad that I got the chance to meet. I was lucky enough to share 4 classes with her here at ISU. In nonfiction, she pushed the boundaries of form and structure, writing about her struggle to connect with the Monsanto plains outside of Ames by juxtaposing prose poetry with photography. Her Iowa Wunderkammer is truly a collection of her curiosities, and while her ever-observant eyes can be critical of the local Walmart parking lots and the coal plant, she also pushes herself to find beauty in everything around her, and she does so in the old men pushing their grocery carts in Hy-Vee, the richness of the soil, and what she calls the low and humble voices of this community that has grown on her in the end. The final version of the Wunderkammer is a Prezi multimedia essay that won Flyway's 2012 Home Voices contest. I've also been lucky enough to read and listen to her poetry in multiple classes, and I'm always inspired by her work. She reinvents herself as a poet with each piece just as she pushes the boundaries of form and the definitions of the words she uses in her work. Whether it's the Occupy protesters camped out on DC's McPherson Square or her undergraduate composition students, I'm sure you can all guess what she might be struggling with there. She forces a reader to reconsider the perceptions and our known paradigms about the people and the places that we interact with every day. She advocates for responsible action and sustainable change, but even more so, I think sometimes for her it's just the simple ways that we as humans can and should be kinder to each other every day. You may have heard her epic reinvention of Allen Ginsberg's Howl. And as this one muse of hers says, the world is holy, the soul is holy, the skin is holy, the nose is holy. So it is my pleasure to introduce the supernatural, extra brilliant, intelligent kindness of Megan White.
So much, Tegan. It was so wonderful. For quoting Ginsberg, so I was really tempted to howl today, but you guys just recently heard it, or some of you, so.
Well, we can hear it again.
Well, you're gonna hear about Iowa instead. So I'm actually, like some of us, not reading from my thesis today. I wrote about architecture and the history of architecture in Virginia, kind of this cultural history, and wrote about everything, really different types of movement and how houses kind of encapsulate movement and how it kind of makes sense of movement in America and especially in Virginia through houses. And so I wrote about, like the Paspahegee-Hawkins, which that was the first Native American tribe that the settlers at Jamestown encountered. And I wrote about forms of resistance that I found in slave quarters at Mount Vernon, and houses that women were displaced from during the Civil War and all sorts of things like that that are really not the lightest of topics to talk about for this reading. So during my time here, like Tegan mentioned, I'm from the East Coast and I've been kind of trying to make sense of Iowa. As many of you, I'm sure, have encountered, most of my friends still, after 3 years, think that I am in Ohio. Yes. A lot of times I kind of rationalize my experience here by thinking of it as this really exotic place, because to me it is. And a lot of times when I'm out driving through the fields, out to ledges with Sean in the middle of the winter, or driving down to Des Moines, I think of myself in Siberia, and somehow that makes more sense to me. But so I've been working on this nonfiction piece that has the framework of a guidebook. It's called Destination Ames, Iowa. And so it has the same sections as a guidebook would typically have. So I'm going to read a few excerpts from that. So there's a phrase book in my guidebook. So the 2 words that I think you kind of need to know for this piece are oh geez. That, is probably pretty self-explanatory. It either means Jesus Christ or looks like trouble. The other phrase that you should know is, well now. And that really means, you have just offended me, and I may or may not tell you why. From the etiquette section, rule number 1, know that an Iowan can smile just as meanly as a New Yorker. The first thing people who don't like Iowa generally say about it is that the people are so nice. This is true. The people are extraordinarily nice. They're so nice that I sometimes want someone to flick me off and yell, "Fuck you," just so that I know I'm alive. I don't think I've ever heard a horn honk in Ames. People here are so nice they'll apologize for cooking you dinner. But underneath all of it, there is this grating restraint like a rubber band pulled so tight it squeaks just a little, and the fibers start to pull apart, and you anticipate the sting before the snap. Last year, my landlord had to get my house inspected by some kind of official rental unit inspector to make sure that it was all up to code and safe to live in. There were no problems except that the plumbing under the sink needed a slightly different kind of gasket. The inspector stood up after kneeling by the sink with her rulers and pencils, smoothed her polyester khakis, and gave the bad news. My landlord replied with, "Oh geez, well now, we'll just have to replace that right away." Typical Iowan niceness. He came by after the inspection to let my roommate and I know that he would replace the gasket. Smiling, he said, "It's really a formality. I want you girls to know there's absolutely nothing unsafe about that gasket. If that's what she wants, why, we'll do it. We want to be up to code now." This sounded like a subservient citizen agreeing with the man, earnest nods and all, but really it meant, "I can't believe that bitch is going to make us replace a fucking gasket." Can you believe that? If he had said what was on his mind, I would have agreed. My roommate and I would have offered him a beer and railed on public officials like nobody's business. But it was Iowa. We were being nice. So I said, "Yeah, it doesn't seem like a big deal. If it was me, I wouldn't really care, but I guess we really should be up to code." Etiquette rule number 1, or number 2. It's okay to talk to strangers. One of my favorite quirks about Ames is how perfectly willing people are to talk to complete strangers. There is no better time to have a good conversation with a stranger in Ames than while using public transportation. The first time I took the bus in Ames, I sat down on the bench by the stop, and before I knew it, the girl sitting next to me had told me all about how she had just gotten engaged to her boyfriend and wanted to move in with him, but her parents didn't want her to, and the apartment that her boyfriend lived in didn't allow dogs, and she really wanted a dog, but she was secretly living with her boyfriend anyway, and if her parents ever found out, she was just going to have to officially move out, but she didn't want to because she loved her family so much. Then the bus came. She was going email her if I ever felt like it. The red bus line goes by all the resources for people with mental and emotional disabilities, which means people will tell you a lot of unexpected things when you ride the red line. Last semester, I was riding home on the red line, and a woman in sweatpants, a turtleneck, orthopedic shoes, and a long, greasy ponytail leaned over to me and whispered, "I just got my disability papers." I smiled and said, "Congratulations!" knowing that meant that she now had access to a lot of resources, the least of which was discounted or free bus rides. She replied, "Thank you. I've been working on getting my papers for 17 years, and they wouldn't say I was crazy, but they finally suck. And now I'm officially a wacko." "That's great. You must be so happy." "I am." "You aren't crazy. Are you a student?" "Yep." "That's great. Your family must be so proud." "Yeah, they are. Thanks." "What are you studying?" "Creative writing." Most people's reaction to this is a kind of soft, pitying anger. Their heads shake almost imperceptibly from side to side as they say, "I thought creative nonfiction was an oxymoron." Their bemused facial expressions easily reveal their true thoughts. "Isn't that quaint? She's chosen to waste her life. We really do have to do something about the welfare system." But the woman on the red line didn't shake her head. She got even more excited than she already was and burrowed through her tote looking for something while muttering, and then popped back up. "Have you ever read this book? I've been reading it and I think you'd really like it. It's called Why Women Write. There's a lot of good stories in there. You could write something like this. I just know it." "I'll have to check it out sometime. Thanks for the recommendation." "Oh, no problem. Women have to tell their minds. That's what you're going to do. You're going to tell your mind, right?" "I hope so. You know what's on my mind?" The woman leaned in closer and whispered, "My ex-husband killed a man with his bare hands, and I'm the only one who knows that bastard." My stop was conveniently at the end of the block. "Be careful," I told the woman, really meaning it. "Oh, I am," she said with a wink. The doors opened, and I left the bus. I heard the woman yell out the door, "Write those stories!" The doors closed, and the bus pulled off down the frozen slush road. So, next section, we're moving to a different section of the guidebook. This is natural attractions. The first one, I guess this is the only natural attraction I have that I've excerpted here, is crow migration. The crows haven't appeared yet this year. Normally in the fall, they flock from the newly barren fields into town, filling the trees and painting the sidewalks with white droppings. While waiting for the bus late at night, I once stood under a tree that I only realized was full of crows when they all rose from their roost in a soft, heaving rustle, flapping together so hard that while I couldn't see the birds against the dark sky, I could feel the air flowing from their wings as they levitated, circled, and landed again. I used to think the crows came into town after the corn was harvested, turning to thrown-out French fries when there was nothing else left to eat in the fields. But since there was a drought here this summer, the corn failed, and what little survived was harvested in September. Now I think maybe the crows migrate when the ground freezes, trapping the worms and bugs under a thick crust. I've also heard that they come into town to warm themselves with the heat that radiates off the brick buildings and makes the air 3 degrees warmer than the fields. 3 years here, 3 migrations, and I still don't understand how this land shifts, turning itself inside out like a seam. Entertainment and nightlife. Campus town. So I've got 2 sections for nightlife. One is campus town. For the finest exhibition of sleek polyester, Campus Town on a Friday night is the place to go. Everything shimmers and sweeps of shots and sequins. There's nothing more beautiful than a 19-year-old in a sausage tube tight cleavage pouring top, a mini skirt with a fresh cricket hem. Just make it 1 inch higher and top it all off with sneakers, because Lord knows Iowans must have practical shoes. Pour, stir, shake, mix in those farm boys with newly pierced ears, gleaming Gangstar, giant faux diamond studs, and stomping boots. They walk in flocks down Lincoln Way like lion cubs with newly sprouted manes, and rush by screaming out the windows of 97 Buicks. All the world is alive, the snow falls, and icicles rattle in the wind. Dollar Pint Night. Now, if you want flannel and a thermal Henley, you've got to go downtown, where we grad students slouch next to townies, cradling two-hearted ales and sod busters. We can argue Faulkner and Atwood, Johnny Cash and Andrew Bird, environmental literary criticism and post-structuralism. They can argue soil science and nitrogen, fractured limbs and colic, drainage tiles and terracing. But all of us are too tired for explosions, too tired for screaming out of car windows, too tired to bring the world back to life in the spring. This is from the activities section, and this is my last little bit that I'll read. So, biking at night. This is an Ames activity. Throw open the heavy doors of the university and unlatch the locks. Swinging legs and a rush of wind move forward through sharp air, so dry its emptiness sparks into a fine film of frozen dust against your lungs. Breathe out like a mystic cup of tea and rush into the night, trying not to wet your eyes against the wind. Squint, expand your senses until you have 360 peripheral vision and streaming smell and ecstatic skin. Pretend those street lamps are stars and race through red lights faster. Swerve down the sharp curve by the skate park into the stick-filled river woods, dark and wavering. Adjust your cat eyes and remember the curves that hug the water. Turn up Hazel, glowing window cottages and lace-lined bungalows, wooden banisters flying. Rattle over railroad tracks and never slow down. You can see the cars coming from a long way off, and you can move fast like foxes through the streets, past the spruce, around the spiny chestnuts, past the frozen buckets of dead flowers and the silent graveyard, faster until all those books have flown away like flocks of geese, and all that is left is the humility of raccoons, wide-eyed in the corn.
Yeah.